follow up on Mr. Naller's point, do you favor a 25% cut in the Office of Civil Rights, which your party has been advocating for? Have you changed your mind on that now?
Well, I think what's important is what's in front of me here, Mr. Ranking Member.
And I appreciate that, but if I'm reading this bill, and correct me, either one of you if I'm wrong, that the office that would be tasked with carrying out this bill, the office that enforces Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, is the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. Is that correct? Is that what this bill says? So what I'm told is that complaints received by that office have more than tripled in the past 15 years and continue to rise. And Mr. Naller pointed out that the Biden administration requested $162 million for the Office of Civil Rights for fiscal year 2025, which is a $22.4 million increase. And Republicans actually want to cut funding for the Office of Civil Rights by $35 million last year, which is a 25% cut. So I'm just simply saying, given, and not just in the area of anti-Semitism, but the demands, the complaints that his office is receiving is skyrocketing. And now my Republican friends are advocating we're advocating a 25% cut. Have you now rethought that? And are you now not going to advocate for a cut and maybe work with President Biden to get, more money for the office so that they can actually do enforcement? Otherwise, it seems that this is more just like a talking point and not real. So will you pledge to work in a bipartisan way to increase the funding for that office?
Well, what I do is I always pledge, and this is for my constituents too, to work in a bipartisan way when it makes sense. I haven't reviewed the merits of that budget proposal personally, so I'm not going to weigh one way or another. But I do think it's important, sir, that you provide that clarity in the law. And again, I don't think that this is a panacea that solves the entire problem by itself. But what I do think is that states have led. And in South Carolina, there was a Democrat that proposed this bill. She was the lead member that proposed the bill. It passed unanimously in the House, in a Republican House, unanimously in the Senate, in a Republican Senate, signed by the governor soon. So I think it is a way.
So in answer to my question, you don't know whether you want to cut the Office of Civil Rights or not. Is that a fair?
Well, what I will say is that I think that it's important for any government agency when they exist or how they exist that they use the tools that they have to perform the services for the American people that they require.
We know that the number of complaints being received by this office is on the rise. And we know they don't have enough, even before all this happened, enough to be able to do the enforcement and the investigations that they wanted to. So I don't, this is not a trick question. It's just basically, the same old, which is, we'll pass a resolution and we'll pass a bill that says all this stuff, but there's no money for enforcement. Let me ask you a question. If I heard you correctly in your opening statement, you talked about pro-Hamas protesters on college campuses. I just want to give you a chance to be able to clarify that. You're not insinuating that everybody who's protesting or who's encamped on a college campus protesting what is going on in the Middle East is pro-Hamas or anti-Semitic, are you?
No, I'm not suggesting that that everybody is, but I would say that if you look at the TV, as I have, it is alarming to see the level of conduct by some of these students and agitators that are present.
I would encourage you to actually go to some of these campuses and talk to some of these students. I was at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst the other day. A number of the students I talked to, by the way, who are in these campuses are Jewish students. And so you're not implying, I hope, that those who are opposed to Prime Minister Netanyahu's policies are somehow anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas. People who are upset with the 33,000 Palestinian deaths right now. You're not. I just want to make sure that we're understanding each other.
No, I don't think it's everybody. But if you look at what is going on and some of the chants that are from the river to the sea and the like, some of the signs that are happening, some of the very ostentatious and ridiculous things that these students are doing, I would absolutely clarify that as anti-Semitic.
And what I just curious, I don't know if you know this or not, but in January, Prime Minister Netanyahu declared that, quote, Israel has to control the entire area from the river to the sea, end quote. How do you interpret that? I mean, is that okay for him to say?
I think it's very different. The context is very different when you look at the intent of that chant.
Well, what is the intent? But what is the intent of what the Prime Minister is saying?
Look, Israel has existed as a country for
Right, but does
a
that
very
mean
long-
that they take over all of Gaza and push the Palestinians out of Gaza? Does it mean no two-state solution? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, he's not the only one, by the way, in his government that has used that phrase, and I'm just curious, do you find that acceptable, or do you find that okay for him or any official in his government to say?
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu has done, given the circumstances, a pretty remarkable job trying to hold together what is the nation of Israel. You have people coming there, you have families that were butchered on October 7th, and trying to pull together a country to focus on that, I think, is remarkable. And I certainly don't pretend to think that everything in war is perfect. But what I will say is that the borders of Israel are the borders of Israel, and they have controlled them for a number of years. So I'm not going to comment on something that Netanyahu said, but what the statements on college campuses about the river to the sea, the context of those are to push the state of Israel out. And the problem with the Palestinian Authority up to this point has been that they have neglected to even engage on a two-state solution. I mean, I just came back from Israel. And there was
Well, as you know, I mean, let's go back to Gaza. I mean, what we do know, which is public, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu knew from Qatar that, because he was asked well before this about continuing to provide support for Hamas, and he gave the green light to that. And so, here we are. I think part of it was no one would expect the Prime Minister of Israel to negotiate with Hamas, which is a horrific, awful terrorist organization. There's no doubt about that. But the bottom line is, it seems like it was all kind of set up.
Mr. Ranking Member.
Yes, I yield to the gentleman.
Thank you. Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked, and this is prior to October 7th,
Right.
by the Qataris, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Qataris, yeah, that's okay, close. Yeah.
Was asked by the Qataris whether they should continue giving money to Hamas.
Right.
He said yes. And the reason was that he wanted to set up Hamas as a countervailing power to the Palestinian Authority so that there could be no two-state solution, so that Israel would be from the river to the sea, and there would be no recognition of the rights of the Palestinian people. That is what he wanted to do. It was a terrible it was wrong morally, but it was a terrible miscalculation because of what Hamas showed on October 7th.
Look, anti-Semitism is vile, is horrific, goes against everything that we as a people.
He was saying,
Yeah, right.
fund an anti-Semitic organization.
I agree, and that's much of the protest against Mr. Netanyahu. By the way, you talk about him pulling his country together. There are massive protests in the streets of Israel, even now, protesting Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership, and many of the families of the hostages, in particular, have been particularly outspoken. So I don't see him. I don't see him as the unifier that you do. But I'm simply saying that on the subject of anti-Semitism, it is vile, it is unacceptable, it is hate. It goes against everything that all of us believe is acceptable in any way, shape, or form. And we should be able to come together with a resolution that gets 435 members of Congress voting yes. I mean, that would be the strongest statement against anti-Semitism. And instead, we get these bills. Can I ask you, Mr. Nadler? I mean, during the hearing and markup on this bill in the Judiciary Committee, what was? Can you give me some of the amendments?
As I mentioned, there was no hearing and there was no markup.
Yeah. And again, it's like really, I mean, the idea that the Judiciary Committee didn't even have a markup or a hearing on this, that we couldn't bring people together and come to a bill where everybody is in agreement on this piece of legislation, where if there were amendments that wanted to be made in order. I mean, and again, I go back to what I said in the beginning, and I'll end here. The office that enforces Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which this bill basically says will be the office that will enforce this, is the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. and complaints received by that office have more than tripled in the past 15 years. And my Republican friends come here, and we can't even get a definitive statement that you won't cut it anymore, that you will actually vote to provide additional funds. If you want to really, enforce anything, you have to provide the funding to be able to get it to us. I think your staff is handing you a note, so I'll let you. I don't know if that's a response for. No? Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I don't have any further questions. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. You know, to equate when these